one of the earliest mechanical wristwatches that could determine your position's latitude and longitude. Although I would prefer to receive roughly 5,000, I would most likely accept around 3,000. Rick Harrison recently spent an incredible sum of money on a single watch, which collectors refer to as the end of days. Was this a ticking time bomb that Rick couldn't defuse? Or was it the best investment of his career? What you're going to learn will permanently alter your perspective on the world of luxury collecting. Time stopped because of the watch. Receiving a ticking relic with deeper roots than most people realize was not what Rick Harrison had anticipated. However, it wasn't just a watch that entered his renowned pawn shop. It was a device designed for survival in the days before GPS, when sailors' only tool in the skies was math. Furthermore, this was hardly a glistening item for a collector's shelf. Once, it was an essential instrument for reaching land and rescuing lives before disappearing into the ocean. Thus, he saw more than just gears and glass when he looked at the end of days watch. History begged to be understood, in his opinion. It's obvious that this watch represents much more than craftsmanship and legacy. Before we go any further, everything you believe to be true about collecting will be upended by what is connected to it. You will be shocked by more than just this. This wasn't a gaudy PC Philippe or a Rolex. Didn't shout status with a fancy stamp or affluence with diamonds. No, this was a functional, not a decorative, longitude and latitude timepiece made by Arnold & Son. Cool. Face you head on. Fantastic. The transaction makes me feel very good. 3,100 seems like a reasonable price to me. When I return, I will undoubtedly need to buy a nice supper for the person who gave me the watch as a gift. It was intended to be read while standing on a ship's deck, attempting to determine if you were going to safely land or crash into rocks. This was science encased in steel in its day. Intricate, uncommon, and vitally important. And he had it in his hands now. How much he had risked to own it was the question, not if he desired it. It was described as a gift by the individual who brought it in. However, it wasn't your typical wedding gift. This was more than a sentimental memento stashed in a drawer. It was among the earliest mechanical wristwatches ever produced with the ability to measure longitude and latitude. It seems archaic to rely on the sun to tell you where you are in a world when GPS can direct your Uber within inches. This watch, however, was your lifeline in those days. It measured the Earth's rotation to aid with marine navigation on 15 degrees hours. The purpose of this watch is not to tell the time. To learn how people used to subsist, you purchase it. He found it fascinating. It was evident in his eyes. He was examining more than one watch. He was looking at a functional piece of navigational history that would help him find his way in the event that all digital devices failed. Each mark, the blue bands, the red lines, tells a sailor something important. Do you see that? Similar to those blue and red lines. Yes. At 15 degrees each hour, the Earth moves. You may determine your longitude by looking at the sun's location. This was not ornamentation. It was created by scientists in the past. Despite this, the man wanted to sell it for between $3,000 and $5,000. The dial's name wasn't well known enough to draw attention at an auction, let's face it. No worldwide luxury marketing, no Hollywood endorsement. Only the legacy of watchmaker John Arnold, whose creations in the 18th century revolutionized marine navigation. His business might not be as well known as Breitling or Omega, but the influence unrivaled. Food. This particular timepiece is more than unique because of Arnold's work, which served as a bridge between chaos and control at sea. It is a survivor as a result. He was aware of the danger. This type of watch has a limited market. Few individuals enter a store looking for a gadget that allows them to determine longitude without the use of satellites. Most people desire flash. That wasn't this. This was profound knowledge in a device the size of a wrist. The sort of thing that could accumulate dust on a shelf before the ideal customer happens to walk into the store. However, he doesn't always buy to make money. He occasionally purchases out of passion. He began to calculate. It wasn't a Rolex. It was not a Constantine from Vacheron. There is inherent resale value in those names. This one? It would be necessary to clarify this. The proper buyer who knows what it is and why it matters would be required. Nevertheless, he made an offer of $3,100, despite the overwhelming odds. Kifetim, a well-calculated risk. Enough to make the seller feel fortunate as they leave. Enough that he didn't wince when he said yes. It doesn't end there. It is only the spark. Considering that Rick continued after the Arnold and Son watch. The myth of Days watch's demise. Rick's agreement on the piece about Arnold and Son was only the start. It was a unique watch. However, what followed made even that seem insignificant. Timepiece with a name so dramatic it resembled a movie. Trailer was hidden beneath all the history, the navigation, and the understated charm of old-school mechanics. They dubbed it the end of days, and he didn't get it easily. Wrapped in black, it arrived screaming, whispering a story of military origins, glory, and an unrelenting collecting mania. Old men sitting by the fireplace weren't the target audience for this watch. This beast was designed to be active. Powered by a design intended to withstand the harshest conditions, it is forged in a striking matte black. There was more to the end of days than a limited edition. It was a symbol, a partnership between the most well-known star in contemporary action movies and the finest Swiss watchmakers. It was worn by Arnold Schwarzenegger in the film End of Days. The tale was sealed at that point. The presence, the look, and the name all came together to create one unique piece of equipment. And it wasn't simply ownership that the man behind the counter desired. And he desired for it to become a part of Pawn Stars' past. This watch wasn't about glitz, so let's speak about the specs. It has to do with being there. One of the most daring designs to ever emerge from Labraz is the Audemars Piguet Royal Oak Offshore End of Days. Established the benchmark for tough, large timepieces of the future and was only produced in 500 pieces. In a bold move at the time, it was the first Royal Oak Offshore to use all-black PVD finish. Its deep dial cuts and strong lines weren't meant to be aesthetically pleasing. They were designed to withstand normal wear and tear, mud and water, and the harsh realities of life outside of a showroom. There was no reluctance because of this. It wasn't just another acquisition when one entered his orbit. He had to purchase this, but it wouldn't be inexpensive because the End of Days came with a hefty price tag even when it was originally introduced. You're lucky to locate one at all today, and the stats go crazy if you do. The End of Days doesn't guarantee luxury in a world full with watches that make such claims. It delivers, supported by a well-known name and a track record of enduring anything. Schwarzenegger, Arnold. Watch the end of the day. I hope to strike a bargain because I've been searching for one of these things for ages, and it's a vista, darling, if it is. He did what few people in his position would do after calculating the rarity of the piece and realizing how quickly collectors would vie for it. Spent a huge sum of money on it. Not because it was ostentatious or well-known, but because it was genuine. Such watches are not simply purchased, they are pursued. They appear silently. Perhaps in a vault someone forgot about, or perhaps in an estate auction. The specialist behind the counter always knows what they have, even if the seller doesn't, and he didn't flinch when this specific watch appeared. He was aware that possessing one meant having a line written in time, a piece of the progress of watchmaking. Audemars Piguet was still being cautious before the end of the world. People saw the cost he paid and believe he went too far when they redefined what luxury meant. There are rumors that he's lost his edge and is overpaying for names rather than worth. However, those folks didn't get the message. It had nothing to do with resale. This was not about flipping it for a quick win the following week. This had to do with possessing a watch that altered the regulations, an item that caused the whole luxury market to improve. A watch is more than simply a watch when it shapes design trends for decades and impacts an entire industry. It's a significant event, and he had no intention of letting it go. This is where things get even more important, because it's not enough to possess the End of Days. It must be safeguarded, shown, and its tale properly told. You can't just put it on your wrist and go to the grocery store with it. This is a museum exhibit masquerading as a weapon, one that requires respect and context. He was aware of this, which is why the planning started as soon as the agreement was reached. How to make a Pawn Stars centerpiece out of this purchase. The fact that he purchased it was not the true surprise, though. He spent so much money. The price tag attracted attention. Rumors spread quickly. People were curious about Rick's true pay. Tens of thousands, was that right? More? The price of the end-of-days watch was no longer just a figure because it had become so legendary. It was a declaration. Additionally, in the world of luxury collecting, the number you drop can sometimes convey more information than the actual object. Additionally, the man who made the trade made sure that everybody took notice. Let's make this clear. We are not making this up when we state that a huge sum was spent. On the private market, the Oudenaarde Royal Oak Offshore End of Days was sold for more over $100,000. $100,000 has flirted with even higher figures at auction houses. The condition, the documentation, and whether or not it still exudes that distinctive Schwarzenegger swagger will all play a role. Additionally, the aforementioned sample was immaculate. Q. Original papers, original box, and a dial that was so immaculate it appeared to have been transported from 1999 right into the store. The value increased significantly as a result. However, the buzz was what actually made the difference. There were already murmurs in online forums. The collectors were ravenous. Not only had the watch retained its worth, it had become an emblem, something else entirely. Therefore, the move went too far, something that even most collectors are afraid of. It happened without hesitation, and 6 figures were paid. To someone who is not familiar with the industry, that figure would seem absurd. But in the world of rare Swiss timepieces, 6 figures is the starting point for excellence. It wasn't just a timepiece that was actually purchased. It was a cultural engineering prize. A fusion of Swiss workmanship, Hollywood influence, and limited edition exclusivity. There was no hype here. This was the past. This is where things start to go crazy. Because he had a different plan. Whereas most people spend a lot of money on watches in the hopes of impressing a boardroom or selling them at auction, he preferred to have it on show, in the spotlight, beneath the glittering starlights, rather than tucked away in a vault. The watch deserved a platform, a genuine one, that only that store could provide, not because he needed the attention. Consider it. Before this, how many viewers of Char Pawn Stars even understood what an end of days was? How many people knew what Audemars Piguet was, or why a single watch model is worth more than a house? That is the move's magic. It was more than just a watch purchase. It was raising awareness. The store turned into a stage. And the clock was not simply ticking away on that stage. It roared. But don't be misled. There was more to this than glitz and revelry. Because the market for high-end watches is erratic and risky when the price tag is that high. The enthusiasm fades, tastes shift, and if you're holding 6 figures in rubber and metal, a bad market turn may lose you everything. He was aware of that. He's lived long enough to see trends come and go. A watch can go from being the ultimate object to a relic that no one wants to handle. This is nothing new to us. Collector bubbles form quickly and burst even quicker. But why was he so certain? It wasn't a gut feeling. It was information. He had done the research, examined the market, and kept an eye on the figures. He was aware that there were not many of these timepieces left in perfect condition. He was aware of the topics being discussed in private forums by CEOs, pro athletes, and celebrities. He even has his sights set on international collectors, particularly in the Middle East and Asia, where demand for Swiss icons has skyrocketed recently. The end of the world was no longer merely a cool spectacle. The story changed the instant he purchased it. It was an asset class. The watch has evolved beyond a historical rarity. It became a part of the future of the show. Surprise sales, unanticipated discoveries, and those moments when his eyes enlarged slightly before the tough questions started were the foundation of Pawn Stars. All of that was combined into one striking legend that was worn on a black wrist. Additionally, the price tag was more than just what he paid. It was what the market reacted to and what the world witnessed. Because the prices began to increase once the agreement was reached, the collectors rushed. Listings were removed. Suddenly, people who had their end-of-days watches tucked away gripped them a bit more tightly. Prices increased and then decreased once again. Not one man had simply purchased a watch. The whole market had been swayed by him. And a pawn store altered the cost of luxury for the first time in a long time. Rick Harrison's actions were motivated by more than simply money when time becomes power. It went beyond simply possessing a unique item. The purpose was to plant a flag. There was nothing spectacular about the end-of-day watch that was positioned in the center of his pawn shop. It served as a reminder that time is more than just a measurement, when it is handled properly. It's leverage. And you don't question whether something is worth the cost once you realize how uncommon it truly is. You inquire as to the value of controlling it. The dynamics of Pawn Stars subtly changed the instant Rick made the transaction, thus he knew this better than anybody else. Unusual, unexpected, and eccentric finds that came in off the street had always been the focus of the program. However, there was more to this. This was the most perilous kind of luxury, the kind that is concealed by limited editions, matte finishes, and decades of collector silence. Additionally, Pawn Stars crossed a line it had never crossed before once it entered his store. The end of the world wasn't only a unique phenomenon. The object was a magnet. The online buzz quickly went into overdrive following Rick's acquisition. Watch enthusiasts from the Middle East, Japan, and Europe began looking at every frame of the performance in hopes of catching a peek. Blogs were ablaze. Forums rekindled. Rick was commended by several for his audacious action. None of them disagreed that what he possessed was unique, but some asked if he had overpaid. It's the type of watch that doesn't come around again without changing a few regulations. Because the pawn store is no longer just a pawn shop, that's where things start to get awkward. It's a storehouse of power. Every purchase Rick makes garners additional attention. Prices fluctuate. Values change. What was once a straightforward transaction abruptly turns into a global collector discussion. That implies pressure. Expectations follow from that. This implies that one poor decision could have far-reaching effects outside of Las Vegas. This is the bit that most people overlook, though. Rick desires that duty. The weight doesn't frighten him. He flourishes in it. This man didn't just happen to be successful. One deal at a time, this man built it. And now that he has experienced the end of days, he is not only involved in the luxury market, but also actively leading it. Actively leading it. Consider the ripple effect. When the watch community notices Rick's action, they begin to reconsider. A few years ago, a friend was fascinated by how it looked. I haven't worn it that often, to be honest. I think that's a little awkward, but it was one of the 500 you were designed for. All of a sudden, other limited edition apps begin to rise, particularly those associated with military design or Hollywood. The distinction between pop culture artifacts and useful timepieces starts to get hazy. Previously concentrating solely on old PC or Rolex watches, collectors are now searching for their own interpretation of the end of the world. That one piece that simultaneously tackles cultural firepower, scarcity, and style. Rick is seated in the middle of it. However, there is a more subdued aspect of this that Rick rarely discusses, because a deeper concept that has been ingrained in Pawn Stars since the beginning lies behind the market moves and collector enthusiasm, the conviction that things are heavy, not only monetary worth, but significance. Significance. The End of Days watch is more than just a timepiece. It narrates tales. In Rick's shop, tales are crucial, and it's a turning point in design, film, and horological disobedience. That is the move's ingenuity. Rick did spend more than most people would have dared. However, he purchased more than simply movement and metal in the process. He purchased narrative power. He transformed his shop into a legendary stage. Ultimately, it is now a part of that narrative. Not just as a high point of the program, not just as a dangerous transaction, but as the instance in which Rick demonstrated his willingness to change the meaning of his store. Because this had nothing to do with timekeeping or getting rapid money. It has to do with legacy. The Globe now observes in a somewhat different way. Pawn Stars are taken more seriously by collectors. When Rick talks, the market pays attention, and this one offer will be used to evaluate every rare item that is introduced later. Was it culturally disruptive? Did the value change? Did the value change? Were the rules revised? Now that's the bar. This is where the twist lies. Perhaps this is only the beginning. Is Rick's bet the most audacious play in Pawn Stars history, or is it only the beginning of a risky fixation with high-stakes collecting? Please share your thoughts with us, and remember to like and subscribe for more exposes that reveal the hidden tales behind the price tag.